I'm Allie with Potomac Beads, and in this video I'm going to show you how to cover a button. So we give a lot of cup buttons out for free with orders. Never fear if you're not a crazy fan of the cup buttons. I'm going to show you how you can not only highlight them with, say, sticking a Rivoli or using them at the end of the project, but we're also going to learn how to cover those and utilize them as a base. Gather up your materials, which again were just listed, or you can check out the links below me in the description of the video. Let's get started. So to get started here, chances are, again, you already probably have an opal cup button that you may have received if you ordered from us at Potomac Beads. And then on my bead mat, I have my Ilos beads, and they are ILOS. They're one of the Puca beads. If you happen to have some pinch beads, you can use those as well. It's just going to make a little bit of a different fit, so keep that in mind. I have a 6mm bead, my 11 seed beads in my sterling silver bright coating in the Miyuki brand, and then my 15 O's in the galvanized gold color. I also have some 1.5 by 2mm rondelles right over here in the corner in the light sapphire AB. We're going to begin a netting, which is what this is based on, and we're going to begin here on the exterior kind of edge. I have a wire guard in case you want to do it as a button rather than just a post earring or the top of kind of a little pendant. You can do that as well if you like the look. And we're going to begin by picking up a collection of 4 beads of the Ilos. To do that, we are going to separate them out by one of our 1.5 by 2mm rondelles. And I have some .006 wildfire beading thread, and I have it in the gray color. It's nice in the gray color because you can see it as I'm working with it, but also with the blue you really won't see it. You could also use the green color as well, which would be a nice color addition. All right, so I have my grouping of 4 here, again separated out by a 1.5 by 2mm Potomac Crystal Rondelle, and I'm going to tie this into a knot. Once I have that knot there, nice tight pull, and I ended with a crystal, so you know that I'm going to want to go through another one of the Ilos beads and bring my thread and needle after the Ilos beads out. We're going to circle around everything that we just added while adding 7 of my 11 seed beads. So I have on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to circle back through that same Ilos bead. So you're coming out of the Ilos, then you're circling back through, which is going to put those 7 beads on the exterior. So through the crystal and the Ilos again, and you're going to repeat this 4 times. So always picking up that 7, and the reason we're picking up 7 is because on our next section of our netting, we're going to grab on to the 4th bead that we picked up, which is going to create a little bit of a triangle on the design. So again, I have 2 of these done, 2 more to go, and then we'll pick up from there. So we're going to progress now, after you do all of those 7, to our next section of our netting, which we're going to take our thread and needle again right up through the first 4 of our 11 O's. And coming out that 4th bead, we're going to start a pattern which we are going to repeat 4 times to get our next layer of our netting. You're going to do 2 15s, then an 11, then an Ilos, 11, and 2 15s. This pattern is going to be repeated 4 times, picking up that 4th seed bead in each of those rows of 7 that we added. Once you have 1 done, repeat again, 2 15s, 1 11, 1 of the Ilos, 1 11, 2 15s, onto that next 4th bead in that row. You're going to repeat this 2 more times, and then we'll pick up there for our next step in our netting. The last one that you put in, so you have again your grouping here, you're going to sew through that 4th bead, as well as back through the beads that you just added, coming out through that Ilos bead. Coming out through that Ilos bead, then we're going to do our next grouping of our netting. So just like we did with the start, we kind of circled around that Ilos bead, and we're going to do the same thing again. So they're circling around those Ilos beads. It's going to be 2 15s, then an 11, then a crystal, and going back. So we have 2 15s, 11, crystal, 11, 2 15s. go back through that Ilos that the thread is coming out of, so these beads sit on the side. So back through all these side beads here, all those little beads that are connector, out to the next Ilos bead. Same deal here. You can see that it's creating a nice little kind of concave area, and that's what our cup button is going to sit inside of. So you're repeating this again. Everything that we do is based on groups of 4. Adding those beads on, 2 15s, 1 11, crystal, 11, 2 15s, back through that Ilos bead. There is 2 times, 2 more to go. For our next portion of our netting, what we want to do after adding in, you can see I have the cup button there. You're going to sew back up through 2 15s, the 11, and the crystal that you just added, and bring your needle out. So just like we did with the last netting, basically whatever sits on the Ilos bead, or the Ilos bead, sorry, is going to go back up through. Here we're going to do a 15, an 11, and a 15, and so instead of that 7th bead, we're going to sew through our crystal. And you notice that I have the cup button in there because it is there to stay. And again, 15, 11, 15, over around to the next crystal. You can see how that netting is pulling in. And it's going to force your button to hang out and sit right inside there. Nice and tight. If you have a different button and you don't have the cup button, you may need to change the count just a little bit of the seed beads. But try it out. As I go through here and tighten this up, I'm going to go back through that first grouping of my 3 and back through the next crystal. Give a nice tight pull, and you can see that little netting, and you still have access, and this is key, you still have access to those buttonholes. To tighten it up, I'm just going to go back through all of those beads that I just added one more time, creating that nice net. Now if you want to, you could use a cup button color that you really like, and you could keep it nice and simple. And when you turn it over here on the side, guess what? You can see the cup button through there. What I'm going to be doing is adding a little bead in there. So we have our 6mm bead. Whether or not you're using a crystal or a bead, like I have the lapis one here, you're just going to kind of pop it down in there, and we are going to use that bead to sew through and decorate the top of the cup button. So at this point here, we are going to sneak back up to the front of the piece. And in the front of the piece, what we're going to do is add in some of our gold 15s and kind of encapsulate around the Ilos, or the Ilos in the front. So when you go back through the netting, you're going to sew back through those sections of V's basically, so that your thread isn't showing. And you just basically zigzag along, kind of finding those lines along the piece. Same is true for any sort of peyote stitch, herringbone stitch. You want to make sure that you're following the line that your thread came from, and that you're not basically jumping across from one to another, because then you're going to see the extra thread. When you get to the top here and you're coming out one of those Ilos beads, we're going to make a nice little connection point here with 5 15-O's that are going around that Ilos. So again, 5 15-O's. And once you have those 5 15-O's on, just like we've been doing, we're circling around that Ilos. So that Ilos in particular, these ones here in the top, they have a fair amount of beads through them. Going in then, we're going to go to the next one, and you can see, don't worry if it's sitting to the top. Once we get our 6mm bead in there, we'll sew around and kind of close it off. Again, back through. Repeat the same thing, sewing through the crystal, and then going around that Ilos bead 4 times to get that nice kind of netted effect. So we've got 2 on, 2 more to go, and then we're going to kind of pull it in towards the center. If you want to do these as stud earrings, and say you do not want to put a wire guard on the back, you can have the beads, kind of that 6mm bead, just push it down and it'll stick in the middle. If you want to sew through and have the wire guard on the back, you can sew through the button and connect it there because you have that nice shank area open. Or what you can do is actually sew the bead in place. I'm going to push my 6mm bead in place, and then we're going to come back to that grouping of 5 beads of those 5 seed beads. And unlike some of the other netting, we are going to sew through every one of those 15-0 beads. So you can see I've sewn back through those 15-0s. And now I'm going to scoot over, give a nice tight pull, scoot over to the next section, back through all 5 of these. What this is going to do, because of the shape of the Ilos bead, is it is going to pull these beads towards the center of the design and force those Ilos beads to sit flat, one of the flat sides facing up. So if you need to, you can kind of manipulate it a little bit with your hands and give a nice tight pull to make sure that flat side is towards the exterior and those seed beads are towards the interior. Once you've got your thread and needle through all of the 15s, you want to make sure to go back through that original 5 that the thread was coming out of, so that way your nice kind of little kite gets completely closed in and you just see that popping through or that peeking of the lapis bead. What we're going to do now is go back down through the Ilos to the back of the piece. And again, if you are doing something that you want to glue on to, say you're making this into a magnet, that you're doing it as an earring, you can go in and actually glue that onto the back at this point. What I'm going to do is jump into kind of that button area and attach a wire guard. Now the wire guard is going to be used to attach, these are actually going to go on my coat, and I'm going to sew these as buttons onto my coat. So what I'm going to do is go back to my original kind of center piece here. I'm going to sew through a 15 and an 11 that catches between the crystals. And I am going to sew through my button, through that hole, and bring the needle out through the top. Now you can see it's going to kind of come out wherever. And I am just going to then go back and kind of scoot underneath and get it so it's going to come out through the cup button on the other side. When it goes through the cup button on the other side, and if you want to, you could have done this at the start, so that way at the back before you put the cup button in, so it's a little bit easier. But what I'm going to do is also separate out my wire guard just the littlest a bit so it makes it easier to sew on to my piece. So the thread kind of goes right in there, you can hardly see it. Your needle and thread is going to pop out. If you want to, you can maneuver it so that it's sewing through the bead, which is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to make it so, because I can still see the hole of that bead, I'm going to kind of turn it a little bit, sew through that bead, and come on back out through the other side of the cup button. So there you see I'm coming out the other side. That's also going to hold that 6mm bead that we put in right in place. There you go. Out the back here now, I'm going to grab my wire guard, sew through the wire guard. If you want to and you need it to sit up a little higher, you can use some 15-0s before. Back through the wire guard, back through the other side of that cup button, and bring the needle out. You want to repeat this about 2 or 3 times, then just tie off the thread, sewing back through the project. Making sure, you can see I'm doing this part slowly, that the thread actually gets hooked on into that little wire guard when you're looking at it. If you want to and you have a bigger button in some of the early design pieces, I also did, instead of the seed beads here, include another layer of the Ilos on the back of the design, which has it sit up a little bit higher even more, so you can see how that netting changes. But the center and the design on the front is going to be the same. Once again, I have this reinforced. I'm just going to go back to the piece along the sides here and tie off the extra thread. I've got 2 made, and I have about 6 more to go because I have a coat that has lots of buttons that I'm going to be attaching these to. So again, with all of this, kind of have fun, kind of change it up a little bit, see what your design is and what button you're kind of capsulating in to change that netting. Once again, keep in mind, I have this as a button cover and not a button, because you can use it with a ear wire, with an earring, create a little pendant out of it, and really have fun decorating up these cup buttons. Thanks so much for joining me in dressing up this cup button. I love the cup button naked, but who doesn't love a good dress on it as well? Remember, if you want to subscribe to this YouTube channel, hit that little bell down there in the corner and get regular updates from us here at Potomac Beads. If you need any materials or just shop online with us, check out the links below me for PotomacBeads.com as well as PotomacBeads.eu. As always, take this video and make it your own. Make changes, modifications, and please let us know in those comments and help out other fellow beaders with anything that you have ideas, questions, or differences that you did for this cup button cover. As always, thank you so much for watching and have a great day and happy beading.